Good morning, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining us for today's discussion on a topic that is more important now than ever, employee burnout prevention. I'm Byron from Keystone Partners, and I'm thrilled to be moderating this panel of experts who are here to share insights and practical strategies to help organizations, leaders, and employees navigate this critical challenge. For those of you who aren't familiar, Keystone Partners is an organizational consulting firm that specializes in outplacement services and leadership development through executive coaching, management development, and leadership development programs. Through these programs and services, we work with organizations to build resilience and prevent burnout. Joining me today are my two amazing Keystone colleagues, Vicki, Rayel, and Tracy Carter. Both are vice presidents and senior career management consultants here at Keystone. And Vicki and Tracy are experts in HR and employee well-being, and they bring a wealth of experience in helping organizations create environments where employees and managers can thrive. I also can't forget my other Keystone colleague off camera, Megan Mendino, who is monitoring the chat and running the polls for us today. Thanks, Megan. Just a couple of quick housekeeping items that Megan wanted me to cover. This webinar is being recorded today. We'll send out a link to the recording of this webinar to all registrants, as well as sending out resources around employee burnout. This will be an interactive session today, as we're using the polling feature with a few polls. Megan and I will kick those off. Megan will also be monitoring the channels for questions, so please put your questions in the chat. We thought we'd get started with a definition of employee burnout, and I went to the ground truth where all knowledge is, when all knowledge is found, ChatGPT, and asked ChatGPT to give us a definition of employee burnout, and it came back with employee burnout is a workplace syndrome resulting from chronic unmanaged stress that leads to exhaustion, cynicism, detachment, and reduced effectiveness. It also talks about employee burnout as a widespread workplace epidemic with significant financial and productivity costs for organizations. Its root causes are often straightforward. It could be excessive workload, lack of control, inadequate resources, insufficient recognition, poor community connection, and perceived unfairness. So all of these could contribute to employee burnout. And as I mentioned, it's widespread in the workplace. But let's take a temperature check right now, and before we jump into the discussion, let's start with a poll. How often do you experience burnout? Go ahead and all right, we're seeing some stuff come in. I don't see any nevers.
Not seeing any nevers. It's
no.
I was looking for every 5 seconds.
Yeah. Well, that's good. I'm glad we don't see any of that. All right. It looks like looks like we're seeing a lot of sometimes and often. So it looks like people in this have experience with burnout. Let's go to the panelists. Let's kick this off. And Vicki, if you could start us off and help us understand, why does burnout happen?
So I want to start by sharing, I do presentations for companies and organizations on organizational renewal. So I talk about after a RIF or a layoff has occurred, how do we support our managers? How do we support our employees? And 2 weeks ago, I was speaking with their head of HR, and she said, if there is one more layoff, I think I'm going to retire early. She was just, she just hit that wall. And I think a big piece of that is that compassion fatigue, the emotional strain. Our HR professionals are in the job of providing resources to humans. So any job in that space, you care. And so you often absorb the stress and the emotions, the things that people see and the things that people don't. And so I just want to sort of start by validating that for everyone in the room, right? That emotional depletion. It's just prolonged exposure to others' suffering. That in itself, that emotional strain is very palatable. The lack of control and autonomy. I hear from a lot of my HR folks about a lot of top-down directives without getting pulled into sort of decision making potentially and those conversations. So, that perceived lack of influence can absolutely be a burnout factor. And then, in this, we'll talk to this a bit later because a question came in prior to today about workload, insufficient support, resources, or even, hey, we got you Copilot AI now, you got it, right? That's not really true, right? So lack of support, whether it's from leadership, lack of resources, high volume of responsibilities, it's just there's an insufficient time for recovery. So those are some of the key things that I've seen and heard along the way. I'm going to pop it off to Tracy to kind of fill some more in from your personal experience.
Thank you, Vicki. I've been with Keystone 3 years, and prior to that, 32 years in human resources management in various industries. So I'm no stranger to stress. Burnout is a result of chronic stress. It's the depletion of resilience, and resilience is the ability to bounce back. So particularly high performers, they are more prone than anyone in the organization to a depletion of that resilience. As Rob shared, this is an epidemic, and it permeates through organizations very quickly and very easily. I want to share a personal story that happened to me long ago, and I'm going to protect the names and the scenes for the innocent. I'll give you a short version of the story. It happened where I spent 9 years at an organization in HR leadership. We had just established a new wellness program for the organization, but it only targeted physical health biometrics. We had a small team of 5 HR people supporting over 2,500 employees. And as this organization grew very quickly, I found myself working 10, 12 hours, sometimes 6 days a week. And I had a 3-year-old and a husband at home at the time. Now, this was an organization that I considered a grind culture, meaning long hours and sacrifice were considered dedication and loyalty to the company. I remember being in my office one day and I was packing up to leave. It was about 5:30 in the evening. And the facilities director, his name is Joe, came in. He sat down in a chair in my office and he said, "Hey, Tracy, you got 5 minutes? I want to talk to you about this initiative we're working on in facilities." And I said, "Well, Joe, actually, I was just about to leave to go home. I've been here since 5 a.m. and I'm wiped out." My leader was walking by my office at the same time and overheard our conversation. Joe said, "Oh, 12 hours. Well, I do that 5 days a week." And then my leader chimed in and said, 5 days a week, 12 hours? Well, heck, I just put in 60 hours already this week and it's only Thursday. So Joe and I looked at her and simultaneously we said, "Wow, you win." Feeling guilty for the lack of 12 plus hours I'd put in, I said, "You know what? I'll stay." And I worked with Joe on that initiative for another hour or so. In truth, none of us were winning. Within 6 months from that day, Joe, in his mid-40s, suffered a heart attack. I put in my resignation due to overwhelming stress, and it also caused me health issues. I was in my 30s. Senior leadership, including my own leader, started leaving that organization for various reasons, and each of them served less than 2 years at the organization. Again, this was a typical grind culture, no different than some cultures that we see today. And it did not have a well-being strategy in place. There were lack of support for balancing resources. There was definitely heavy volume and long hours. And at the time, I didn't have a clue that I was experiencing burnout. Back then, I didn't know about monitoring my stress or the stress of my employees. I didn't know about setting boundaries or how to model the well-being behaviors for the organization. This was many years ago, but today we know better, so we can do better in building resilience in our organizations and for ourselves. I love sharing this experience with people, especially my clients, because I hear it all so often through various stories that they share with me regarding chronic stress and burnout.
Wow, thanks for sharing, Tracy. That's a powerful and impactful story, and just shows how the culture and the way that leadership models behaviors can really impact, the stress level and the burnout. And then Vicki for sharing. Thanks for sharing those, those contributors. They all of these factors contribute to stress level and contribute to burnout. So yeah, very powerful. Let's talk about the impact of burnout. There's tons of data out there on workplace burnout. Employee burnout is costly. On average, it costs 34% of an employee's salary. It's also a major driver of turnover, with the burnout employees over 2.5 times more likely to seek new jobs. Based on that, Tracy, can you tell us why this workplace burnout is such an issue and why it matters?
Sure. Burnout prevention, I think, is probably the critical factor to talk about. Um, our organizations have a commitment to the well-being of employees, and preventing burnout is more than just a perk. It is actually a strategy, or should be a strategy, of organizations. The strategy should include shared responsibility and partnership between organizations, leaders, and employees. Um, it can and should be a part of a wellness initiative that burnout prevention is stressed, or I shouldn't say stressed, should I? Burnout prevention is definitely a part of a wellness initiative. Um, and leaders at all levels are crucial to help prevent burnout. They should be trained, though, and supported to recognize and address burnout when it occurs on their teams. The return on investment will show up in decreased labor costs, organizational efficiencies, and engagement scores. So workload and resource balance and rebalancing should be a commitment by leadership to employees to avoid burnout and ensure that expectations are aligned with the available resources.
Very good. Vicki, did you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I'm going to add a few additional points. So I have a certification in applied neuroscience. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about, I'm going to go neuro on us for a little bit. So hang with me. I swear I won't talk in mumbo jumbo terms, but why this matters, I'll talk specifically culture shift. Okay. So it is really critical that we understand the connection to culture, just like Tracy's story sort of shared. And manager well-being is a really great foundational point to start. So if you're familiar with, there's something called cognitive behavioral theory. So CBT essentially just says, for anyone that goes to therapists, you might be familiar with this, but essentially our thoughts affect our emotions and our emotions affect our actions. Okay, so for example, if your managers are saying, I'll never get caught up, nothing I do is enough, right? That's what's going on in their head. They're going to feel frustrated, hopeless, irritable, right? That affects culture. And then behaviorally, their actions, they're going to be curt with team members. Maybe they're just, they're less reliable. They're visibly fatigued in meetings. And so all those things impact the team. You see how this all connects, right? So the team senses the negativity. The team becomes disengaged. Morale dips. The burnout risk spreads. So, the culture is key. And it really does start with your management and leadership team that includes yourself. And so this CBT thought process, that is why this is so important. I want to add one more tip onto why this is so important. Your emotions are valid. So another neuro moment, when you're having dopamine depletion and cortisol overload, that's the stress, it drives what's called like a threat response. So that sort of uncertainty drives that response. And so when we combine this, the brain is so focused on survival. It's not proactive, it's survival mode, right? So is it emotions after the transition and the turn and the change? The threat response is on, burnout then goes up. And then of course, life events, right? It's not just work.
Yeah.
So if you think about the life wheel and how it's all health and career and financial circumstances, all these things touch each other. And so there's a lot going on here. It's really complex. So this is just so critically important, right? The data that Rob just shared, and then the culture effects in our leadership team, right? So all this is all connected. So this is really, really important. So glad you're here today.
Yeah, thanks, Vicki. And I have a question for you from the chat. How do you differentiate stress triggers by the employer versus what you talked about, those life stressors, versus personal sources?
So the stress triggers from the employer, some of those things, there's probably a locus of control conversation that might need to happen here.
Yeah.
So these are the things that are happening organizationally that are happening to us, that let's list that out. So we already all are kind of aware and know that these things are happening. So I would probably start with having a conversation about, these are the things that I'm seeing. What are you seeing? Do you agree that these things are on a scale from 1 to 10? In a one-on-one, that could be a good conversation. But then these are the things that are on your plate, your calendar. Man, just take a look at your calendar. Have you been taking lunch? I'm seeing you sending emails at 2 a.m. What's going on?
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's things going on that really the manager is going to have a better attune to that, so they can get a better sense of like the day-to-day work. So I want to talk about that in terms of work, have that conversation. And then we can address those things, because those are these are the things in our control on your day-to-day, what's on your plate. But if after 3 or 4 weeks of working on those items and we're still seeing the fatigue, then it brings up a broader conversation, like within, what's we're able to talk about in these circumstances of, hey, have you noticed you coming in late a lot? You've been taking a lot of personal phone calls. You seem really distracted. Are you okay? Is everything okay? And so you're not there to be their therapist, but you are opening up the dialogue, because what we don't want is for people to feel like they can't trust and communicate what's going on with them, because maybe they do. I've had a lot of my clients have taken short-term disability or stress and things like that because of personal things. So I would start with work. And then if we're addressing those things and we're still not seeing improvement, then it might be comfortable to bring up the bigger picture, because those things affect, but through the lens of, you're not going to get in trouble here, right? I'm here to support. So
Yeah.
anything to
Yeah.
add to that, Tracy?
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Vicki. There needs to be a safe zone between leadership and employees, that employees at all levels, managers as well, are able to come to their leaders to express any concerns that they have, are able to understand whether or not the stressors that they feel are mostly from the work environment, mostly from home, or any other factors in their lives. It really doesn't matter, because if you're in the work environment and you're contributing to an organization, if you are under a large amount of undue stress, it doesn't matter where it's coming from, that needs to be remedied. So, from an organization's perspective, knowing that stress can be real or perceived, the organization has a commitment, or should have a commitment, to work with employees to say, what is the problem? How can I help? How can we reallocate resources? How can we send you on one of our wellness retreats? What can we do differently to support you? So, again, just knowing that someone is experiencing chronic stress is the first hill to get over. And from there, working with that person and providing that safe environment so that they can share about what's going on and how you can help.
Yeah.
Right.
No.
We
Good.
will go more into what we can do about it. I just want to add one more thing to the locus of control. Reframing is also incredibly critical. So if there's a list of things that are happening external to this, like what you can control, and it's kind of just happening to us, a good way to frame that for your team is we can't control what's happening, but we can control how we react to it.
100%.
Good point.
Yeah. Great point. Great point. And getting back to that, how do you differentiate stress triggered by the employer versus personal sources? A lot of times, I know for myself, it may not just be one or the other. It's when, you're getting a little bit from all different phases of your life. And all of a sudden, it's that culmination of stressors from work, from family, from things out, other factors. When it all boils up together, that's when you get that burnout and get that, feel that, overwhelming feeling, if you will. Um, another question on the chat. Any tips on watching for burnout with remote team members?
Ooh, good point.
Tracy, did
Yeah.
you have something to add?
Yeah. That's a really good point, especially in these times when we have a lot of team members that may be working remote. The most important thing is still establishing a connection, which you can do with remote employees. So that's usually as a result of frequent communication. It can be one-on-one meetings that are set for every 2 weeks or once a month, although once a month is a long time to go, but regular communications with that employee to understand, what's important to them. And it's not just about work, what's important in their lives as well.
Exactly.
So getting that type of connection with your employee who's virtual, I mean, yeah, there's some limitations. You can't just walk down and sit in their office or vice versa, but you can always get them on camera. You can give yourself a little bit of relief from camera fatigue and
Yeah.
get them on the phone. You can set up fun exercises via virtual uh, for your teams, for that individual to get more involved with what's going on at work. All of those things are very doable in a virtual setting. It just takes that extra effort. In other words, it's not about, oh, we'll skip today's meeting because there's not much to talk about. Make sure that those one-on-one meetings happen on a regular basis, even if it's just to check in and get a visual and understand what's going on with your employee and how they're feeling about their organizational pressures.
I have two
Yeah,
things to chime in on that. Go ahead, Rob.
please. No, please, Vicki, go ahead.
Okay. Everything Tracy said was perfect. I'm just going to build on it by sharing two specific things. So Keystone is fully remote, right? We're a remote first environment here. So we do something called Coffee Pals. We love that. And it's a great way for people to get to know each other across the organization. Every month you're assigned to someone and they spend a half an hour just talking and getting to know each other. You as a leader, if there's people on your specific team and you feel like maybe something's going on, your spidey senses are up, you could do something quarterly or monthly where you just build in half an hour. It's more casual. And I'll share another thing that I do with my teams. Every couple of months when we all meet together, I manage 8 people, so I'm sure if you have larger teams, this might be more difficult, but you could do it like a Zoom poll or a Mentimeter or some other tool. You might know this from camp, honestly, but it's Rose-Rosebud-Thorn. So I'll ask people, share something Rose is like something that's really great that's going on. Thorn is something not so great. And Rosebud is something you're looking forward to. I learn so much from my team, from whether they share something personal, professional, things going on. I get oh my gosh, I learn so much from my team and they learn from each other and it really builds our connection. So I'll just share those two specific anecdotes.
Oh, that's great. Great. Thanks for sharing. It sounds like the theme here is connection and relationships and when with remote teams, obviously, and being fully virtual, there can be isolation, and this is where and that can contribute to burnout, and that can contribute to stress. And by creating those connections, creating those relationships, that can mitigate that.
And Rob, I just saw someone wrote in the chat that when they see that their virtual employee might be struggling, they invite them to come on site if there's an on-site option, at least, to meet people, to talk to people, to spend a day there. I can't tell you how energizing it is when I have an opportunity to spend time with my coworkers. We're like, as Vicki mentioned, we're all remote. So every time we have that opportunity, it just rejuvenates me.
Yeah,
So that's a
exactly.
great idea. If you have the option of bringing an employee in to meet and talk with other people, it can work tremendously to alleviate stress.
Thank you. Thank you both on that. That was great. Yeah, David, thank you for, I saw David chimed in the chat about the coffee pals and the buddy connections. Yeah, both those are great. And that's, what we do here at Keystone to keep those connections and keep those relationships alive. Okay. Well, we talked about, what burnout is. We talked about the causes. We talked about why it matters. How about, what can we do about it now? Like, what are some of the things that we can do to prevent burnout? But before we discuss our ideas about burnout prevention, Megan, let's take another poll from the audience. What are you doing out there to help mitigate burnout for your teams? Oh, here we go. We got some people are starting to come in. You see this communication. I think that's great. We're getting a lot of that. That looks like a well-rounded response
Pretty
rate.
even.
Recognizing and celebrating wins. That's certainly there. Enjoying breaks and times off. I like that one.
Absolutely. Oh, pretty even, huh?
Yeah, and all across the board. That's great.
Glad to see no, absolutely nothings.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. Before we have Vicki and Tracy weigh on this, we had a couple questions from the registration on this topic. The first question: this seems to be a particularly difficult goal with an HR team that is very lean. How can HR teams that are running so lean support employees facing burnout? Tracy, you want to share that?
Yes. As I mentioned, it is very common for HR high performers to experience chronic stress and ultimately burnout. The Human Resources Department is the heart of any organization. And as Vicki mentioned earlier, they extend their resources in order to help their employees, oftentimes at the expense of their own well-being. So the Human Resources Department is definitely an important department to work through um, burnout prevention. One of the things that we sent through, I think earlier to the group of participants is something called 20 micro resilience practices. And if you don't have that link, we'll make sure that we get it to you after this program. These micro resilience practices are small things that you can do within groups to really make a difference. You may have heard of one, it's called calendar blocking. That's when you make sure that you block your morning so that you're not getting and answering emails before your start time, which is so critical. Same thing with after work hours, blocking the calendar there. There are other things, routine buffers, like finding out anything new that happened in the world. When you wake up in the morning, check the news really quickly. Don't spend too much time there. And do something for yourself, whether it's a quick game, something that you can do on your phone. Definitely exercise and spend time for yourself before you jump into work. And then making your bed. Now, this one is weird, but I love it. I love making my bed every morning. It gives me that sense of accomplishment. As soon as I hop out of bed, if I don't get anything else done, I've made that bed in the morning. So those are small things that as HR teams, we can share with one another. We can put into practice within our own teams, in our own meetings. And I'm going to make sure that this is sent to you via that link if you don't remember receiving it, because there's so many here. I can't read them all. And we want to make sure that you have access to that.
Great. Vicki, any thoughts on that?
No, amazing. I think we had another question come in as well that is going to tie in so beautifully with those tips. But I will just say one thing. The Make Your Bed, there's actually a small, teeny tiny little book called, it's something like Make Your Bed. It's amazing. You should check it out. It has a lot to do with like mindset. Excellent book.
I've read
Excellent.
that.
So yeah, Vicki, the next question we had from the registration was this and Tracy alluded to this in her most recent comments here. This is a situation where the caretakers need care. How can we create the space and grace to give HR team members time to take care of their own burnout when they're supposed to be addressing employee burnout?
Yeah.
Right.
I'll chime
ahead,
in
Tracy.
on that one.
Please.
Yes. So, again, I mentioned that this is an organizational strategy. It's not a perk. It should be a part of a wellness program. And if there's not a wellness program, there should be a wellness program. This is also, like most strategies, top down. So from the CHRO to everyone else in the organization, modeling those behaviors that tell the rest of the organization that your well-being is important will go a long way in making sure that employees feel that well-being is important. Especially for HR teams, if there are opportunities within the course of the day to give breaks and share experiences and do things that protect or prevent those stressors that we talked about, those are so critical. And at the same time, they're modeling for the rest of the organization that well-being is important. Does that help? That
Very
answer the
much so.
question?
Thanks, Tracy. Go ahead, Vicki. I know you have some thoughts on this as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's that we can't pour from an empty cup thing, right? So I'm going to talk a little bit about attentional bias. So our brain is always attending to something, right? You need to be in charge of what your brain is attending to. Now, part of this is survival as humans, right? We need to sort of voluntarily focus on some things than others, right? That's that prefrontal cortex, that executive functioning. But when we pay more attention to certain things around us, while simultaneously ignoring others, we need to be doing this. But if our bias and we're focusing on the anxiety and negative memories or overwhelm or the decision making or certain behaviors, that's what can lead to that, right? So you're so focused on everyone else that we're forgetting about ourselves. So
Yeah.
it's not easy, but some of the tips that Tracy mentioned, using mindfulness and thinking critically, can help you minimize these effects. Retraining attention away from the threat-related information towards a non-threatening target, right? So you're so focused on getting everyone else up and running that we're not focusing on our own self, our own healthy behaviors. So attentional bias, you need to start to shift. Like you are in charge of what your brain is attending to. So you need to start to prioritize that. That's really what it comes down to.
That's a great
Good.
point. I'm sorry, Rob.
No, go ahead. Go, Tracy.
I was just going to say, I had a team where every morning we had morning huddles for 5 minutes. And the morning huddles, well, sometimes they ran to 10 minutes, but the morning huddles were really intended to do a temperature check. What's on your plate? What's important? What are you stressed about? Green light, yellow light, red light type thing. That really helped us to get a feel for who on the team might be carrying a heavier load. And it helped the team dynamics for people who wanted to voluntarily offer to help that team member, or for me to look at the situation and to assign additional team members to the person who felt more stress. We also use that time for a little bit of fun, telling stories about what happened with a family member or something fun that happened at the organization the day before. So those quick, stand-up meetings in the morning were so critical to getting the day started and to help me as a leader understand where the team was and what I needed to do to support them. And all in all, I think more than anything, it created a better morale.
That's great. That's great. When I think, and thank you for sharing. When I think of this question, the analogy that I think of is that when you're in an airplane and there's an oxygen emergency, or they brief you on that, the oxygen mask come down. You need to put the oxygen mask on yourself so you can be helpful to the folks that need help putting them on first. So I immediately, my brain went to that when I heard that question, and so thought it was very relevant.
So true. HR needs those oxygen masks first.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, now we're going to talk about what we can do about employee burnout. Vicki, what can HR teams and organizations do to prevent burnout of their employees?
Yeah, so I'm going to talk about 3 main things, and then I know Tracy's going to fill it in with her amazing tips and strategies as well. So I'll talk about fostering recognition and connection. We've talked about this a little. It's so easy to focus on outcomes that we forget to talk about the progress.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's really just that acknowledging the employee contribution, so it could be in the one-on-ones. Not everyone needs a big public display. Some people actually don't really like that. I remember when I when I hire someone new in my team, one of the things I ask them is, how do you like to be recognized? Because some of them don't like the big public hoopla, but it is the progress, not the outcomes, celebrating those wins. This is particularly important if you're seeing resistance in your employees, if there's change and churn, new leadership, new process, even if there's been a riff or change, you're going to probably get some people that are not willing or they're not capable because they have new tasks on their plate or other things going on. So if you start to see a shift of someone that was just like, we've tried that before, we've done that already, they're cynical, they're questioning. Like when you're seeing that person start to just dip their toe into the new way, we really need to, Tim, I really know this was tough for you to kind of get on board with that, but I really appreciate that you gave that a shot last week. You tried the new process and it worked out really well. I appreciate it. So just those little things. And these are things I hope that are good for you, your organization at large, but also your managers and leaders. So your management team really needs these tools. Supporting continuous learning and growth. So this really needs to be happening, and it really connects back to understanding what those drivers are for folks. So there's going to be things that are really important to the organization, and we need to kind of get people upskilled. Maybe you're doing various, talent reviews or skill checks, but connecting someone to their deeper career purpose, their why in their daily work. That is really critical. That can absolutely help get someone out of a rut because they're less focused on the churn and they're more focused on the energy. So again, these are all about reframes. These are all about shifts. So one tool, Simon Sinek, if you're familiar with him, like what's your why? He has a whole book about it. He talks about it all the time. I don't know if we're doing like a book club with that. That could be an interesting conversation. I hope managers aren't just waiting for the annual review to talk to people about what's energizing in their career. We want to have those conversations ongoing. If we're talking talent reviews, we're not just talking skills, we're talking interests. Right. And so one tool we've recently put into play here is like a 9 box. If you're familiar with that,
Sure.
Who's our high performers, our core players, our high potential people. If managers are having a hard time even figuring out where their folks sit in there of like, yeah, I love this work and I want to take on more, that's a disconnect. And so if we're having those conversations, that can inform the energy, right? And the last thing I'll talk to is just that overall manager burnout. We kind of talked a little bit about that related to HR burnout. Is it task delegation? Is it boundaries? Is it wellness coaching for managers? There's so many next steps there. But those are some ideas. Tracy's already talked a bit about, I call it calendaring, but like evaluating folks' calendars, not to be a micromanager, but to just notice, just to create the pause to notice what's going on. Hey, did you take your lunch today? I saw that you keep booking meetings over your lunch break. I saw you sent an email out at 10:30. What's going on? I didn't see you leave your desk all day, or your Slack channel was just like on all day. You've been frantically sending messages like all day, modeling the behavior that you want to see, those things. And so there's something called the self-command muscle. It's essentially strengthening your ability to control where the brain goes, right? So it kind of ties to the attentional bias, but I'll just close on that to prevent the burnout piece. And we're trying to help give wellness for our managers. We need to help, move people from this fight, flight, freeze mode to a more productive place. So those are some things I wanted to share, but I'll hand it off to Tracy to kind of fill out some more things.
That was great, Vicki. In addition to that, I'd add about training and support of managers. I said a little bit about this earlier, but equipping the managers with tools to spot burnout symptoms amongst their teams and managing workloads realistically and being willing to secure resources and rebalance resources when necessary is so important to preventing burnout. You can even hold managers accountable for well-being as one of your key performance metrics. You can promote workload and resource alignment, monitoring and adjusting tasks as necessary, pairing people up. You notice, as I mentioned before, someone is struggling, pair up another person with that person who's struggling to get through it and share the responsibility and reduce isolation that can cause stress. Also modeling, as I mentioned, those behaviors, encouraging healthy boundaries. Joe, it's 5:30. I've got some things I need to take care of after work tonight. So let's set an appointment for 9:30 in the morning. That's setting that boundary for yourself so that the person doesn't keep you longer than you need to be for whatever it is they have a problem with, and you're focusing on your own well-being. Avoid after-hour emails. That's something Vicki mentioned. Reduce that video fatigue by, calling on the phone sometimes, or, if you're in person, walking down to talk to the person as opposed to that phone call or that scheduled meeting. Normalize taking breaks. PTO should be taken without guilt or negative repercussions. Take those breaks that you need. And as a part of those 20 micro resilient practices I told you about, it says right here, stealing time for yourself is not something that's negative. It should not be met with repercussions. Standing up in between meetings and taking a stretch break, walking outside to enjoy the sunshine, if the sunshine is there, for 5 minutes. Those are key tips and tricks that you can use for yourself and model for your team and encourage your team to do to manage stress. There's another tip that I love here, and it's walking meetings. I had one leader who would take us on walking meetings every day, each and every one of her employees, typically all together. So it was not just a walking meeting, it was more like a walking parade. But those were so fun and such an opportunity to share information while doing something healthy, like taking a stroll. But these tips are great, and I want to make sure that you have them. We'll get them to you in the link.
Thank you, Tracy, and thank you, Vicki, both. Some great tips, a lot around, modeling with leaders and managers that creates that culture within the organization that allows them, that sets boundaries. Some really good stuff there. What if it feels like it's too late? What if employees are showing signs of burnout? What's the best way to re-engage and support them to avoid turnover? Tracy, do you want to start?
Yeah. Of course, the risk is there, right? It might actually be too late, and that employee is silently planning their escape. But the key is to try and recognize what's going on. If someone even gets to the point where they're giving their resignation, you can always stop that too. You can always talk about what it is that that employee, that high performer needed in order to stay with the organization and work to remedy that for that employee. But again, the risk is there. It might be too late. They may be planning to leave the organization. And stopping the conveyor belt for employees, both high performers and others across the organization, to take the time out to find out what's going on with them, and making a commitment and showing a commitment and effort to them to avoid their burnout can work wonders for any organization and hopefully mitigate some of those employees who are overly stressed, burned out, and ready to leave your organization. And we have 30 professionals, no, we have 80 people here today? 80 professionals here with us today. That really shows a commitment to addressing this big epidemic, and we're providing these tips and tricks to help. So I hope that they've helped.
Thank you, Tracy. Go ahead, Vicki. Did you have something else to add on that?
Again, this is to we've tried it. It lasted a week or it lasted a month. There's no stickiness to it. Like, it's not really working. It's not staying, right? That's really the build out here. So, I'll bring it to the progress loop piece. So I have some research information here. So research shows that progress, especially in meaningful tasks, is a profound motivator. When people feel they're moving forward in their efforts, whether completing a project, solving a challenging problem, learning a new skill, their engagement, satisfaction, and productivity naturally increase. So the progress itself becomes the source of energy and purpose, creating a virtuous cycle. Imagine a little tornado where motivation fuels further achievement. Okay, so motivation grows from progress, not from waiting for the big win. So we've talked about this before, those bite-sized things, but small goals equal action, recognition goes to make adjustments, and then we sort of train our brain to stay engaged, right? So it's almost, if you're familiar with the Stanford created a book about, what was it? It was like the creative, are you familiar with that? I'm blanking on the name of it right now, but
No.
it's the I'll think of it in a moment, but essentially it's about thinking like a creative person, essentially, right? So we're that creative brain. And so it's ongoing. It doesn't stop. If you know a creative or you're a creative, it's constant. So we're trying to help wire our teams to be more, it's cyclical. So a couple of examples, setting small, clear goals. I did this one change in my workflow today. Great, it's achievable. We reduced overwhelm. We gave our brain a quick hit on the accomplishment. Taking a micro action today, which hint, hint, we're going to have that be our next poll. So be thinking about actions that you want to take. I sent one message to this new vendor. Great. I made some progress. Let's get that momentum going. Track your wins. Celebrating progress again, not just the outcome, and then reflect and adjust. What gave me energy? What drained me? What's the next small step I can take? It's a rewiring. So if it's not sticky, again, it takes about 28 days to develop a new habit. Think about, starting to work out again or drinking more water, all those things we say we want to do and then we don't. We don't need a New Year's resolution, right? We just need to have accountability. So I think building that into the calendar and it just becomes a routine back to culture, it builds on each other. So that progress loop, Google it. It's a really great motivator to keep progress going and to make this more sticky.
That's excellent, Vicki.
Yeah, great stuff. Great stuff. Well, thank you guys. Those are some great ideas for preventing burnout. As Vicki alluded to, we have a final poll question. As I put this up, we still have a couple minutes left. If you have any Q&A, please put it, any questions to add to the chat, please put them in now while we're going through the final poll question. What are you willing to commit to prevent burnout for yourselves? Megan, if you can put that up there. Yes, thank you.
I commit to nothing. Better stay at 0. We gave you lots of tactics.
It's pretty spread out here. What do we got?
It's our progress loop and play.
Yeah, prioritizing tasks and managing workload. Setting boundaries.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, I like that one.
Excellent.
Okay, looks like we got a good. It's very well spread out.
We should have had an option that said all of them. I hope you're doing all of them, but again, bite size. We'll take a bite size. This is great.
Yeah. No, that's fantastic. Good stuff. All right. We do have a question in the chat. How long does it typically take to recover from burnout once you intervene? Does anyone want to take that one, or does?
Depends on just the burnout. It depends. There's so many factors. Go ahead, Tracy.
I'll try. It like you said, there are so many factors there. It just really depends on how deep things are with the person in terms of their burnout. Maybe it's not just work. Maybe it's home and other issues that they're dealing with. So that time frame is just really on a case-by-case basis for rebuilding. The most important point, though, is that you take the time to address it and rebuild and monitor progress with recovery from burnout. Some people can recover in as little as a month, some people a year. The most important thing is that as leaders and HR teams, we're monitoring, we're addressing, we're supporting, we're letting them know that we have a commitment to help them work through it. And that'll keep the employee in the organization and hopefully resolve the burnout issues faster.
Yeah, I would say keep a close eye. The first 1 to 3 months is the most critical, but I would keep a close eye for up to 6 months. This information is coming from, so as you know, we do coaching for folks that have been affected by a reorg or a RIF or a layoff. And so I call it the detox period. Tracy, I'm sure you can allude to this too. I had some people that have worked at their organizations for 25 years. They tend to take longer to recover from the burnout that they experience from all the churn and everything going on in that role. And then I had people that have been at their orgs for 3 to 5 years, after like a couple of weeks are like ready to go. So there's that component, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then there's the added component of life circumstances.
Yeah.
So if 80% of the burnout is work related, I think that 1 to 3 months, you're fine. But if it's a personal, that I've seen people, like I said, take short-term disability. I'm talking people that they've gotten insomnia, hair loss, like really bad physical stress reactions. They're going to take longer. They probably would be like more of those short-term disability type folks that just need that really deep recharge. But when they come back to the office, 3 to 6 months would probably be a good fit for those folks. Yeah.
Great. Thank you. Another question that's come in, what have you learned from employees who come back from the brink of burnout? Which is interesting. One of the things about burnout is sometimes it's a loss of hope or a lack of hope. It shows that people that come back from the brink of burnout, there is hope. So, but go ahead, please.
Okay, go ahead, Tracy.
Yeah, I've had a few that I believe came back from the brink. And overwhelmingly, the feedback that I've gotten from 2 that I'm thinking of was gratitude. Gratitude to the organization and their leadership for taking the time to notice and making the commitment to help. And the willingness, these 2 people that I'm thinking about joined in our wellness program to help other employees. So to me, that speaks to knowing that you were able to resolve something with the help of others, meaning the leadership teams and organizations, and being so grateful for that you're willing to help others. And for me, I think bringing someone back from the brink of burnout is only going to yield positive results in terms of their feelings for the organization and your commitment to their well-being. So I think it's so worthwhile, if for nothing more, than to see somebody recover from that.
I'm going to talk about a lobster. Okay, here we go. So I'm not sure if you know this, but when a lobster grows and it needs a new shell, it hides under a rock and gets rid of the shell to get the new shell. So when that happens, it's scary, it's uncomfortable, it's dangerous. So it's almost like we've all been through negative things in our lives, our personal lives, and sometimes we come out better on the back end when they happen. And then eventually we kind of get through it. So I feel like a lot of people are the lobster. They're like, oh, that was so tough. It was a deep transition, but now I have this like newfound, like Tracy was saying, whether it's, appreciation, but also like I am stronger from it, right? It's like we cannot grow as humans without the challenge that life brings us. So there's a deeper appreciation. I think we all know that, right? And then I would say that time heals all wounds is sort of 80% accurate. I would say that what's really important is that time matters. Patience is therefore very important, and it truly is a process, but there is a light at the end.
Nice. Thank you. Excellent. One last one. This is a speed round. How do you support remaining employees dealing with burnout after a layoff or a RIF? Now, I know both of you are very experienced in this this scenario. So, Vicki, do you want to start?
Yeah, I think it comes back to that time piece. Very much meeting people where they're at. So, right, they've been through a riff. They're not exactly like, let's do the resume. That's not where we're at mentally. So, from my perspective as a career counselor and a life coach and all those different things I bring into play, it's more conversations around values, motivators. It's back to basics. It's a very important reflective time. So sometimes people want to stay in their wheelhouse and some people don't, or they're not sure where they want to go because where they were, it was tiring or exhausting and they just need to reconnect back to their energy. So motivators, values, really critical conversation. Sometimes confidence is taken a hit. So the conversations focus much more around strengths. And just reevaluating their why back to that conversation. So those are some big things that I do in my coaching to help people come back around, because nothing else in the search matters if those things are not. It's foundational. It's foundational.
And for
100%.
those,
Tracy, please.
yes, I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead, Tracy.
Okay. So for those of us or others who are left behind, lots of stress there from the element of losing friendships or the perception of losing friendships because people have left the organization due to a reduction in force. Definitely shifts in workloads cause a lot of stress for the people remaining. The best approach to those is to make sure that there's a reset. In other words, to get people together, understand what the objectives are, what the key performance indicators are, or how they've changed. And most importantly, how you treat the people who are exiting, because your remaining people are looking at that very closely. So programs like Keystone Partners that helps with the transitioning process really show that you value your employee, and other employees see that. And knowing that that value and compassion is there makes it easier to keep and build morale after a layoff in the organization.
So important. Thank you, Tracy. And thank you, Vicki, for sharing. This has been a great and informative discussion on employee burnout. I know I've taken a lot away from this. Hopefully you all can, everyone can take something back with them. I want to thank Vicki and Tracy for being wonderful panelists and sharing their knowledge on this subject. Megan, thank you for being behind the scenes, monitoring the chat and working the polls. I want to thank everyone for attending and taking the time to attend. We're right up on the hour there. So just a reminder, you will all receive a link to the recording of this webinar. You're also going to receive resources around there, as well as we referenced those 20 micro
Resilience.
tips on resilience and other resources around preventing burnout. So you'll get some takeaways for that. So thank you, everyone. We're right up on time. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Good job, Rob. Thank you.